The course we are studying is discrete mathematics. We are learning the subject logic, and we're talking about quantifiers. So there are two main quantifiers that we are usually using. The first quantifier has the funny shape of the capital letter E in a mirror image of it, and the other quantifier has also the funny look of the capital letter A flipped on its narrow head. And sometimes we see those quantifiers when they come on their own, solo, just one of them on its own. And sometimes we see those quantifiers batched up in a couple, and we see both of them together, one after the other. And I will show you an example. So in this example that I just wrote down, you can see that we have an expression that means the following. It means there exists a number. There is a number that exists. Perhaps there's only one that will qualify. Maybe there is more, but at least we know that there exists some number. And then now I'm going forward to the other part of this expression. And we know that regarding this number that we know that exists, I'm saying that there is this number that exists. And now I'm going to this part of the expression and I'm continuing and I'm saying that regarding this number that exists, regarding this number, every number, each and every number that I will choose from the whole world, any number that I will choose, and now I can say something about the relationship between those two numbers or about their values. For example, I have an example. I am thinking about some number that exists. You will recognize which number I'm talking about in a minute. I know that there's some number that exists. There exists some number. In a minute you will know which number I'm talking about. That regarding this number that exists, it doesn't matter whichever number in the world. Now I move to this portion of the expression. It doesn't matter which number in the world I will choose, whatever number in the whole world I will take, then if I will multiply those two numbers, one with each other, one with the first one with the second one, then the result I will get is the second one. So which number am I talking about? The number one, of course. If I'm taking the number one, there exists this number, the number is the number one. It doesn't matter which number in the world I will choose. If I multiply one in some other number, the result I will get is always the second number. If I take 1 and multiply it by the number 8, then 1 multiplied by 8 is 8. If I take the number 1 and I multiply it by the number 100 or any other number for that matter, then the result I will get is the value of the second number, 100. So this is an example of something I can say, and I will also write here in the parentheses what is the result, like what is this relationship between the first number and the second number that I'm talking about. So as I said, there exists a number. We know that I'm talking about the number 1, that which any number in the world I will choose, if I multiply the first one and the second one, the result will be the second number. So I'll write it down. So all this is nice and dandy, but sometimes we are tackling something that is a bit more complex, and this is the case when we are being told that we're discussing all the numbers in the world, like I said here. It's actually some kind of a bluff. It's not really all the numbers in the world. What happens is sometimes a person can say, or some question can tell us that there exists a number, that regarding this number, every number in the world that we will choose, and then they have some kind of exemption, some kind of carve out, some kind of limiting the borders of this whole world. Hey, we were talking about the whole world. No, it's not really the whole world. Now we have some kind of exception. We're not really talking about all the numbers in the whole world. We're talking about the numbers in the whole world that are divisible by 2. Or we're not really talking about all the numbers in all of the world. We're talking about all the numbers in all of the world that are bigger than 0, or that are bigger than 100, or are between 5 and 8. So we can see that sometimes we are confronted by sentences that seemingly they are talking about all of the numbers in the world, but it's not really the case, because a minute later they say it's not really all the numbers in the world, but all the numbers in the world that satisfy some kind of exemption, satisfy some kind of a limitation. So when we get this kind of expression, the way that we will write it down will be completely different than what you saw above. So if I'm going back to the same example and I'm talking about this example that I given, and I will repeat it, I said that there exists some number. We know that the number is 1. That for it, whichever number I will choose, then if I multiply both of them one in another, the result I will get is the second number. Because we know that if you multiply 1 with any other number, the result you will get is the other number. 1 multiplied 10 is 10. Okay, but now I'm going to make it a little more complicated, and I'm going to say, when I will say that I'm talking about all the numbers in the world, I'm going to actually limit this world to a much narrower space. So now I'm going to say to you, there exists a number in the world, I'm talking about the number 1, that for it, whichever number in the world that I will choose, and now I'm going to limit this world. I'm not really talking about all the world. I'm talking about, let's just choose randomly for this example. I'm talking about all the numbers in the world that, now I'm limiting this world to something much narrower, all the numbers in the world that are bigger than 50. Okay, now I'm kind of bluffing when I'm talking about all the numbers in the world. I'm actually talking about only all the numbers in the world that are bigger than the number 50. Okay. And now I want to say something about this relationship between those two numbers. I can say, as I said before, if I multiply the first one and the other one, then the result I will get is the second number. Fine. But now when I want to write it down, it's going to look completely different than what you've seen above. So I will show you how to write down this kind of sentence that I'm saying there exists a number, the number 1 in my case, that for it, whichever number in the world that I'm choosing, but the world is a bit smaller than I really wanted you to think. The world is consistent only of the numbers that are above 50 in my random example. Then, and now I can say something about the relationship between those two numbers, that if you multiply them for one in the other, you get the value of the second one. So I will show you how to write it down, okay? So we begin with this as the same as before. We said there exists a number. Here I'll write it down. But now I'm going to open a big parenthesis. Now I'm going to write the other quantifier, that means all the numbers in the world. Notice that I'm using another variable, y, like before. So we have x and y, okay? Because we're talking about two different numbers. So I say that there exists some number that for it, every number in the world that I will choose. But now, as I remind you, we're not really talking about all of the numbers in the world. We're talking about all the numbers in the world that satisfy some kind of limitation. So my limitation, which I randomly chose, is that this world is all the numbers in the world, and the limitation is that they have to be above 50. Okay, so now is my time to write this limitation on the world. Here I'm writing it down. So we said that it's not really the whole world, it's the whole world of all of the numbers that are bigger than 50. So just notice that I'm talking right now about the number y, okay, the second number. So I'm going to say that the number y has to be bigger than 50. Okay, this is the limitation on my world. So I'm open another parenthesis. And in the beginning of this parenthesis, I'm going to write this limitation on my world, which makes it smaller. So I said that my world is actually consistent only of the numbers that are bigger than 50. So I wrote it down here in this part of the smaller parenthesis. Now what I should do is I should draw an arrow that represents the meaning of entailment, consequence. Okay, entailment. So here I'm going to draw it. So I made this little arrow, and now is the time which I write in this part the result, which means what I want to say about the relationship between those two numbers, or their result, or their value. So in my case, I was talking about the fact that there exists a number that for any number in the world, and in this case, the world is a bit limited by some kind of limitation. And we want to say that if we multiply the first one and the second one, we will receive the value of the second one. So this is where I write this result, this relationship between those two numbers and their values. So we had it here above in this area of this, in this parenthesis. And in my case, in this example, I'm going to write it here. So this result, which means like, what do I want to say about the relationship between those two numbers? What do I want to say about their values? I actually need to put it here in the end of this parenthesis after the arrow in this portion. So as you can see, the way we write it, those two examples is kind of different. It's very different. So we saw that in the first case, what we did is I said, there exists a number that for it, all number in the world that I will fancy to choose, then there exists some kind of relationship between those two numbers, and there's something I want to say about their values. But when I put some kind of contingency, when I put some kind of limit or limitation about this whole world that I'm choosing from, then the way I'm going to write it down is completely different. Then I'm going to write it completely different, and I'm going to write it here. So in the other way, the second way I showed how you write it is when the whole world that we're talking about is limited. So in this is when I want to say something like, there exists a number that, if I choose for it any number in the world that satisfy this kind of limitation, like this world is only of the numbers that is bigger than 50, then I can say something about the relationship between the first number and the second numbers. So as you can see, it's being written in a very different way. I hope this lesson was valuable to you, and I hope to see you all in the next lesson.